So how could you be wrong when you have to answer this kind of psychological question? Because you can think and you know your processes. Well, psychologists think that that's not good enough. That doesn't kind of cut the mustard in terms of explaining behavior. I'll give you a couple examples about intuition and common sense doesn't work. For example, I have a cup right here. This is a cup I drink out of every day. If I ask you a quick question, which is longer, the circumference of the bottom here or the length of the cup? And I'll show you the cup just so you know I'm not cheating. It's not a trick cup or anything. You might be tempted to say, well, maybe the length. This looks pretty long. It must be longer than the circumference on the bottom. And I'll do a quick explanation of actually that's not true. If I take my fingers, and I could barely wrap around the bottom like that. There's some gap. But if you measure the top, you can see that I still have even more to come up out of. So even just looking at a question like that, it seems very simple. And your intuition might give you one answer, but the actual answer is very different. On the second hand, common sense seems to be very persuasive at times. And that's really not a good enough answer also. I'll give you a common sense kind of thinking. For example, if you want your child to develop good behaviors, one thing you might do is want to give them rewards, right? If they get A's, you give them presents, and that's one way to encourage them doing better and liking what they do better. That's kind of a behavioral expectation, and that's in pretty common sense, right? That makes sense. If you have a kid or a brother, if you give them candy every time they do something nice to you, then that's going to encourage that kind of behavior. They're going to like doing it. If you want your kids to like playing the piano, every time they play, you give them a bunch of money, all right? And that's going to develop like an innate love of piano playing. And researchers in social psychology has found out that actually that's not true, using very controlled experiments. And so we hear a lot of kind of common sense saying every day. When you're sick, your mother says, oh, drink chicken soup. We hear things like, birds of a feather flock together, or opposites attract. And these are, the last two are actually kind of in conflict. We hear a lot of these sayings and we think it's kind of true. How do we know it's true? Because there's so many common sense sayings that are kind of in opposition to each other. And so researchers think that only through experimentation, carefully controlled studies, can we find the answer to these questions.